it's Nicole and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to share how I care for my Neofinetia falcata orchid. This orchid is also known as the Vanda falcata, and I've had it for almost 3 years, so I'm going to share how I grow it, how I care for it, and some struggles with this orchid and my care. This video is a collaboration with several YouTubers. There's too many of them for me to name them all, so I have linked everyone down below, so check them out. You may find someone with conditions very similar to yours, so their videos should be able to help, and it's good to get different perspective on these videos. So let's talk about this orchid. So I got this orchid almost 3 years ago from Hauserman Orchids. It came in a chunky bark mix, and it was also in bloom when I received it. The fragrance is amazing. If you guys grow Neofinetia falcata orchids, their flowers are very simple, they're very white, and they're just really tiny, but the special part about it is the fragrance. So when I got it from Hauserman. Straight away it was right in bloom, and the blooms lasted for like maybe 2 weeks, and I would smell them at night, and I was like, this is a really cool orchid. It had multiple fans, and then when the orchid stopped blooming, I repotted it, and I was getting into a real kick on basically just putting everything in semi-hydro around this time. I came across a lot of channels on folks that were using semi-hydro and putting a lot of their orchids there, and I just started putting everything into semi-hydro. Now, the first 2 years that I had this orchid, I was able to get it to bloom several times, maybe 4 more times. It had a beautiful root system. The root system seemed to adapt really, really well. And I was just really happy with the setup. I did updates on this with the whole Care Collab group, and I will link some of these videos right here from the first year in semi-hydro. It was amazing. I thought it was a great grow method for the orchid. It kept blooming, and over time, about 2 years in, I noticed that some of the fans on my Neofinetia falcata started to die. So it had maybe 4 or 5 fans, and then 1 fan died, and then another fan died, and then I had 2 or 3 fans left, and I was like, what gives? And when I was flushing my collection one day, I gently tugged the orchid, and it just completely came out of the Leca. It was in semi-hydro, and I just realized that all of the roots had died, and any new roots that came into the media were just dying off the minute they hit contact with the Leca. So maybe about 8 months ago, 7-8 months ago, I decided to repot my Neofinetia falcata. I moved it out of Leca, which is an always moist system, and I moved it into this moss system. So my very big Neofinetia falcata with multiple fans is now unfortunately this. It is bouncing back a little bit. It was very, very set back when I realized that all of the roots had died, but it is growing new leaves, which is a nice thing. You can kind of see like the roots here they're not doing the best. Like when they started hitting the Leca, they just died. But I believe there's new roots that are popping in here, and I think it's gonna pull through. I think it's gonna be okay. With that said, I don't think it's gonna grow flowers anytime soon. Like I said, I lost a bunch of fans. You could kind of see like the remnants from it. They just started dying off immediately. Seeing this orchid decline was kind of sad for me because I just loved it, and just picking it up and seeing it just have all its roots die wasn't a great feeling. And I realized that with most of my Vandas, that's been the case. So I'll link another video of me repotting another Vanda, and you'll see that a lot of the roots, they kind of grew on the outside, they didn't grow on the inside. So I came to the conclusion that growing in semi-hydro with Leca, it's okay in the beginning. You'll even have a period of time, like in the case of this orchid, for 2 years it was doing great. So I noticed that the root system adapted to the growth system really well, but in the long run, when that old root system needs to be replaced by the new root system, it just didn't adapt. So it was very interesting. I had success that I thought was going to be long-term, and just years later is when I realized this really isn't working long-term. So with regards to how I care for this orchid, it is in 100% sphagnum moss. I don't use this self-watering setup at all. I keep it empty. It was just the best pot available for this size. It was the perfect size for it. I water this once it dries. So depending on the time of year, it could be once a week, or now I water like 3 times a week, and that's sufficient, sometimes 4 times a week because it's really hot here in New York. But I also try to fertilize with a weak MSU fertilizer solution. So I give it, lately I'm giving it about 125 parts per million of MSU fertilizer, and I give it to it like once a week. I try to flush it once a month. I'm not always on top of the flushing, so sometimes that's more like every other month, just to be honest, just because I don't really have the time, and so far it's been okay. And that also could have been a factor in some of my orchids declining in semi-hydro. I just didn't have the time to flush it as much, so that's something I want to keep in mind. There are growers that are able to flush much more, and they have much more success than I do in semi-hydro. So especially Ninja Orchids, she's constantly flushing her orchids. So if you grow in semi-hydro, it works fantastic for my Cattleyas, but I've noticed my Vandas, it doesn't do really well for them. And some of my dendrobiums, the Latoria types, they tend to die off in semi-hydro. So flushing is really, really important. So if you don't have as much time to flush like I do, I would just be cautious with this grow method. I grow this orchid under grow lights. I have it under pretty strong grow lights. So it's with my other Vandas. So it's getting plenty of light. This is not a highlight orchid, but it tolerates the light just fine. So it's with my Vandas, it's getting Cattleya level light. It probably doesn't need as much, but it's doing fine. I've given it pretty high light since I've gotten it, and it's been working out just fine. If I could do anything differently with this orchid, it would definitely be, I would have left it in an organic setup. So like I said, I got it from Hauserman Orchids, and it was like in chunky bark and perlite. I don't like bark, just because you need to water it more often. And you have to, the way that I water, I have everything on shelves, so I have to put water in every single pot, and when you have bark, it just doesn't distribute right. So if I had a greenhouse, I could just like hose everything down and let it drain to the bottom. So I prefer to have some moss in my mix, so I usually do like bark and sphagnum moss, that way it distributes through the pot a little bit better. But if I could do things differently from getting this orchid, I would have just put it in moss straight away, and I think I wouldn't have set it back. So I think this orchid needs wet-dry cycles, at least in my environment. I'm sure some folks have success with it in semi-hydro, but I would have just kept it in moss. It's something that I'm gonna move all of my Vandas out of semi-hydro, just because I found that almost all of them in the long run have declined. So that's what I would have done differently. I hope that this orchid bounces back. Again, it's been 3 years since I've had it. It was nice and full, and now it's just one fan. So I will keep you guys updated over time. Maybe in another year, I'll have another fan or two. Definitely set it back, but I'm gonna hang on to it. I'm hopeful that it's gonna bounce back in this setup. And I learned a lesson here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Do check out the other channels on the Care Collab. They're all linked down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye everyone.